Imagine you walk into a historical building and then you feel something weird. Maybe the air gets really cool, maybe you feel a breeze that shouldn't be there, or you hear a funny sound. Or you could be like Harry Martindale that seen a Roman army walk through a wall. Now, I dug this little story up during research for a future video, which you would see if you hit that subscribe button and that bell. Anyways, the future video is going to be on, is there consciousness outside of the body? But this story caught my attention because it has something to do with the stone tape theory. So this stone tape theory is basically like something traumatic happens to somebody or some sort of major event takes place and the earth kind of records it. And then eventually it starts playing it over and over and over again. And this story will kind of give you an example of that. So this event with Harry Martindale isn't a singular event. It's happened multiple times and not exactly the same situation, but seeing and hearing the same exact things. So at the time, Harry's 18 years old and he gets called to the treasurer's house. It's a historic house in York, UK that is located on an ancient Roman road. Now, he goes there, he shows up, and he's going to start running water line. That's what they needed done. And he starts digging through the floor. Well, come to find out, this is a pretty big task because apparently the floor was a couple feet thick. He didn't know it at the time. He brings his ladder down to the basement, he sets it up, and he starts drilling through the floor, beating a hole through it, trying to get this pipe in. Well, while he's doing this, he starts hearing a note playing, and he really didn't know what it was. He thought it was just somebody playing something way off in the distance, but the note never changed pitch. It was just a singular note playing. That was it. But it kept getting louder and louder. Well, he's like curious about this. He was thinking somebody was playing with something or something was getting screwed up, and he noticed it was coming from the wall. Now, while staring at this wall, trying to figure out where that note was coming from, like what I could imagine a curious puppy would look like, a Roman soldier walked through the wall. Now, this kind of like threw him off track. He's confused. He's like, I don't really know what to make of this whole situation. He says, so I was just kind of like dumbstruck. I sit there and watch. Well, the first one come through, walked at an angle, and then walked through another wall. Well, he looks back at the wall, and here comes somebody else. Only this time, they're on a horse. Yes, this person comes through on a horse, and the one peculiar thing that he notices besides something walking through a wall is their feet are cut off until they make it to the section of the floor that was dug out for the ancient Roman road. He said at that point you could see their feet, and he said it was very peculiar because they just looked like you and me sitting there having a conversation, but they never paid attention to him. They never noticed him. They just walked on through. Now, seeing the horse kind of brought him out of a stupor. He ended up falling off the ladder, landing on his ass, and ran over to a corner of the room to kind of watch the event unfold. And at this point, there was multiple soldiers kind of walking through here. He said he didn't really keep account because he was just confused by the whole thing. He said he could not figure out what was going on, but he was estimating there was around 20. Now, at this point, he's like, you know what? I really don't need to do this job anymore today, as I would also not want to do that job ever again. He grabs his ladder, he walks upstairs, and the innkeeper's there, and they're like, oh, you look like you're kind of freaked out. He's like, I just seen something. They're like, oh, did you see the Roman soldiers? He's like, yeah. So this scares him so bad, he ends up going home. He calls his doctor and explains all the events he just seen. He's like, I don't know what to do, doc. I'm kind of freaked out. The doctor's like, you need to take a couple days off. And that's what he does. Now, he doesn't really think much about this story, which is weird to me. I don't understand why this happens in so many cases of like weird, mysterious things where people are just like, nope, not going to talk about it. And they just put it out of their memory. However, a few years later, people are talking about this lady that had an experience similar to his. He ends up getting a hold of these people and explaining his story. Now, he couldn't remember the exact date. However, he remembered that he told his doctor. So he got hold of his doctor. The doctor gave the date and corroborated everything that he said. Now, obviously, the doctor didn't say anything, but he's like, yeah, he did have this whatever episode on this day. So there's some sort of little paper trail to it. But what's weird is his story lines up so well to other people's. Now, of course, people had questions. They're like, did he see what he seen? Well, one thing that he's seen that kind of threw off his story was one of the Romans was carrying a round shield. Now, the Romans at the time carried a square shield. It was a tall square shield with a few emblems on it. However, his was odd. So people were like, obviously, this guy's full of shit. He's making up things that weren't there. Well, according to the really nerdy historians, there were some people that were kind of brought into the army that were just kind of taken over in other villages, and they were carrying these round shield with a what looked like a half bulb in the center of it. So what makes this such a compelling story is the extreme details. He said they weren't dressed very smart, which I'm taking as an American that he meant they weren't like clean cut. They had a scraggly beard, their clothes weren't perfect, but he described everything they were wearing down to a T, and archaeologists and historians looked into it, and he's right, like everything he described. And they said it would be really weird for somebody to know these things that weren't so invested into this part of history, and he really wasn't, and this is the only incident that ever happened in his life. So it would be weird for him to make this up many years later, which he didn't make up because he told it to his doctor, so there's that. But it's just odd that somebody would go through all that trouble, and so by paranormal investigator standard, it's a pretty substantial story. Now, what does this have to do with the stone tape theory? Well, all the people that seem to experience this event see the same exact thing. And it's not like these are some sort of entity or anything like that that's reacting or seeing or acknowledging or doing anything with what's happening around them. They're not interacting with the world. They're not interacting with people. Walls, they're walking through walls. It's more like it was such a heavily trafficked spot and that was used so much that the world kind of recorded that moment, and it plays it to people who maybe are more receptive to this type of thing every once in a while. And I think it's an interesting story. But like I said, I'm going to do a few different little mini series of these different stories, and I'm going to tie them all together in one big video. So yeah, if you want to subscribe. Also, if you like that, be sure to leave me a like. It helps. I'm just trying to get to like 2,000 followers. That's all I'm saying. I think that actually I'd like to have like 2 million, but 2,000, I feel like that's where I'm at. You know what I mean? Okay, yeah. Have a great day. Bye.